Thank you very much, Suleiman and Aisha, for that wonderful question. I have so many memories to remember, and the years have gone by, but they're not too long ago. But things are so different today that one wonders how come things are this different. Not too long ago, I was a student in the university myself. Let's say about 30 years ago, as undergraduates. And at that time, you could go to the university ref or canteen and get a very balanced diet for 50 naira. No, 50 kobo actually. You know, we are so used to naira today that we have forgotten kobo. It used to be that 30 kobo would give you a very hearty breakfast in the university. That 30 kobo will give you tea or coffee, it will give you some fresh fruit, it will give you some toast, it will give you some sausage, it will give you some boiled egg or scrambled egg, or my mouth waters when I remember that 30 kobo could do all that for you. And for lunch, 15 naira could get you a very full lunch, such as say rice and beans with chicken and a bottle of water. Even tea will be served during lunch, and then you have a choice of either a banana or an orange. And for dinner you have tuwo, you have miyan kuka, you have taushe, you have other things. To remember that only 30 years ago you could have that makes one so nostalgic about the past. And one particular thing I always tell my children, when I remember I almost cry, is that the scholarship they used to give us, it wasn't much. Like in a semester or a term, they will give you, say, 300 naira. 300 naira. Not 300,000 naira, not 30,000 naira, not 3 million naira, but just 300 naira. And that money you are expected to buy your books, to pay your small charges such as sports charges, maybe 2 naira, student union, maybe 1 naira, etc., etc. And of course, naturally, tuition was free, and accommodation was charged at a very, very small token, maybe 5 naira for the semester or for the session. So that money used to be a huge amount of money. We felt like we were rich. When you have 300 naira in those days, 30 years ago, I mean, this is money you could buy a motorcycle. In fact, you can buy a second-hand car. You could use that 300 naira to buy a second-hand car, because a new car wasn't that expensive. It was only a few thousands. And at one time, when we got that money, and we had paid all our dues at the university, you had paid your hostel accommodation, you had paid your student union fees, you have paid library fees, etc., etc. Maybe all totaling no more than 10 to 20 naira. You had such money that you feel like you're a millionaire. And then you start thinking, do I buy? Usually students had a Vespa then, or a Honda motorcycle. Students didn't buy cars, they didn't need cars because the buses were efficient, the school bus was good. At Bayero University you could take the school bus to the new side and back, and everything was going fine. And then you had this surplus, so to say. And then you remember, what do I do with this money? And then a friend suggested, hey, we have this money, why don't we just travel? And everybody was thinking, yes, that sounds good, that sounds good. So then we decided, where do we go? Okay, why don't we go to Umrah? Umrah, that's the lesser Hajj in Saudi Arabia. But that would entail getting a visa, applying for a visa, and then embarking on the journey. Then somebody suggested, why don't we go to London? Yes, London. Why not London? Well, at that time, you didn't need a visa to go to London. I mean, until SAP came, and IMF conditions and the valuation of the Naira and things like that, there was no visa. As a Commonwealth citizen, you are a citizen of the United Kingdom as well, as they wrote in their immigration things. And yes, somebody suggested, why don't we go to London? And oh yes, London. And you didn't need a visa, not like Saudi Arabia. If you wanted to go to Umrah, you had to get a visa. So off to London. And how much was the ticket? And that's the catch. How much was the ticket to London? The ticket to London was all of 210 naira. Student rebate. 210 naira. When I tell my students and my children this story, that a ticket 30 years ago on Nigeria Airways, Kano, London, Kano, excursion student fare, you can buy it for 210 naira. I mean, my son would look at me and say, you mean like 210,000 naira? I said, no. He said, like 21,000 naira? I said, no. Take away the zeros again. He will continue taking zeros away until he reached 210 naira. At that time, 1 naira was almost £1 sterling. And it was more than $1. Because $1 sold for like 75 kobo. So like 1 naira 50 kobo could buy you $2. And yes, you could get a ticket to London for 210 naira as a student. And you go to London, you go around the shops, you have 20 naira notes in your pocket. You didn't need to change to the British pound sterling. You would go to the shops and you would shop all you wanted. You would pay the hotels using your Nigerian naira, because it was a valuable currency, it was a strong currency, it was backed by a strong government, and it had integrity, because Nigerians at that time were people of integrity. So they will take your 20 naira as legal tender even in London. When I remember this, I wonder what happened to us. What is happening to us now? How come that the ticket, the student ticket of 210 naira is now 200,000 naira? I don't know what percentage increase is that, but just take 210 and then compare it in 30 years with 210,000 for the same ticket, for the same seat. And you could spend 20 naira in London, and nobody will tell you, hey, go and change it, we need £1 sterling. Devaluation created this problem for us. SAP, Structural Adjustment Program, IMF conditionalities, etc., etc. And at that time, we used to have a camera called Polaroid, and that Polaroid camera used to take and develop your pictures and it will come out. And then we had cameras like the one you are using now, but at that time there was no studio. As far as northern Nigeria was concerned, in Kano, Kaduna, Jos, there was no studio where you could develop color prints. None. So what happened was you needed to send them to Britain. There's a particular studio in Manchester. It used to be called Max Spillman. Max Spillman. We remember it very clearly because as students in secondary school in the 70s, we will use our cameras to take pictures. You can develop black and white, but no colors. And so, what would you do if you wanted color prints? In the late 70s and the early 80s, since there was no color studio, what you would do was, okay, you get an envelope. What is after you have done with taking all the pictures, you take it to a black and white studio for them to retrieve the negatives from the picture, because if you open it naturally, exposure to light would damage it. So you will take it to an expert who will bring it out for you in a roll and in the casing. So what do? You get an envelope and you write Max Spillman, P.O. Box such and such, Manchester, England. Now to develop and to print these exposures cost about £2.50. That was about what? About 3 naira, 4 naira max. So you will go to the post office or to the exchange places or to the bank and say, I want to buy £2.50. They'll say, okay, that's 4 naira. Okay. So you give her 4 naira, maybe 3 naira, you get £2.50 cash. So you open your envelope, the one you just wrote the address of Max Spillman, you put the £2.50, and you put your exposures, your negatives into it. Then you seal it. You buy a stamp, 10 kobo stamp. 10 kobo stamp will take a letter to London, and you put inside the envelope a self-addressed envelope. So you post it. At the post office, everybody knew, every worker at the postal office, they knew that envelope contained foreign currency. Because Max Spillman was known to be a picture developer. And so nobody will stop that letter. It will reach Max Spillman. After a week, they will post back to you the prints, the color prints of your picture, as well as the negatives. On that self-addressed envelope you send, they will put a stamp and then it will be sent to you. And then you'll be very, very happy. Now, the nostalgia about that is try sending pounds sterling in an envelope today, or dollars, or euros, or anything. In fact, try sending naira in an envelope. What happens? What made us so cheap? What made us so crooked is the rush to get rich quick and the rush to get this foreign currency. If the naira was strong, I remember Charles Soludo, the former governor of the Central Bank, he wanted to reduce zeros from the naira. For example, he wanted to drop 2 zeros out of the naira denomination. He wanted to redenominate, not revalue, but redenominate, because at one time the Ghanaian CD was 10,000 to the dollar. 10,000 CDs, $1. It didn't inspire any confidence. It was horrible sounding. 10,000 to the dollar. At one time, it was 1 million lira in Turkey to $1. You go to the supermarket, you go to the restaurant, you order a kebab, and they tell you 10 million, please. All these countries, what did they do? They revaluated, they redenominated their currency. They threw away the zeros. They said, okay, 1 lira now is $1. And it's their country. Nobody can tell them no. Ghana, they threw out 5 zeros. 5 zeros, they threw them away. So the new CD became 1 CD, $1. Charles Soludo wanted to do it in this country. They shouted, they screamed, they said, how could he do that? We would have had 1 naira to the dollar by now. And maybe we would have, us who have now seen the past, maybe we'll start seeing the return of the past. Maybe the youngsters of today will say, hey, naira is a strong currency and I will be proud of it. Not many young people are proud of the naira now. I hear that many young people prefer the dollar and the pound sterling and the euro to the naira. And many students in the higher institutions, especially the private sector, the private institutions, they pay in dollars, I hear. I'm not sure, but I hear even secondary school sometimes they pay in dollars. The government is shouting and crying. The National Assembly is saying we shouldn't do transactions in dollars. Some airlines insist that they be paid in dollars. Why? Because our naira is something else. So there's a lot of nostalgia. There's still some sort of sadness when we remember that 210 naira could take a student to London and back, and then you could post money in an envelope and it would arrive safely and nobody would touch it. That's a lot of honesty. That was integrity. That was a rich country. That was a contented people. Now, with all the campaigns we are doing, with everything we are telling Nigerians, 419 is rampant. Everybody is going around trying to dupe others. We remember, we just read, a Nigerian duped a woman of hundreds of thousands of dollars in America. A whole family's inheritance went down the drain. The husband of the woman shot her and killed her, and he killed himself. That's how tragic we have become. So it is that we have to look again at ourselves and see what best can we do. How many minutes do you have? So,
how can Nigeria go back to those days? In your opinion, what can we do to make Nigeria like before?
I think our basic problem in Nigeria, everybody knows, is corruption. Whenever anybody speaks, they will say it is corruption. It is corruption that had made people to be disenchanted with the nation. It is corruption that had made people to want to go back to those ancient and long gone days. It is corruption that had made everything so difficult in this country. And the problem with corruption in this country is that it is not being punished. I mean, like, you convict somebody for stealing $20 billion and you jail that person for 2 years, or option of 750,000 naira fine. And what is 750,000 naira fine? What is that? Maybe less than $10,000 for somebody who stole 24 billion naira. I mean, China, if you steal $1 million in China, you are sentenced to death, you are executed, and all your property is confiscated and forfeited to government. So, even your children will not inherit that loot. So unless we look at corruption in this country clearly and drastically, we can't hope of going back to where we were before. Ghana, they did something. Everybody knows what they did. They killed corruption. Well, corruption exists everywhere, but they did a lot, and they solved a lot of it. And because of that, there is minimal corruption compared to ours. When you compare to countries such as China, there is corruption in China, of course, but not as rampant as we have. A certain chairman of, director of the equivalent of NAFDAC in China, he gave license correctly to manufacturers of drugs, and he collected money, and the drugs were not well certified, and so these drugs killed some children, and he was arrested, he was tried, he was convicted, and he was executed. Everybody saw the picture. It's all over. He was executed for collecting bribe, and the money he collected was forfeited to government, i.e. all his property, all his money, all his savings, everything would go back to the government. So most people in 1,200,000,000 people in China, they will think twice before they become corrupt. They will think twice. Here, no. They are given a pat on the wrist, as they say. A certain woman stole 191 billion naira out of banks, and she was, what, just given a pat on the wrist. The sentence was very minimal. She had property in Dubai, she had property in UK and everywhere else. A certain Inspector General of Police stole 11 or more billion dollars, and was given 6 months jail time. I mean, where are we going? Unless we tackle corruption, we are not going anywhere. And it is the National Assembly that should strengthen our laws. Unfortunately, there is a lot of, of course we remember, there are dollars flying around, discussion that some money exchange hands, and the matter is in court. So the people you expect to put amends on the tragedy are the same people now being accused of doing things. Of course, we remember the case of the money spent over the power sector reform. Where is the money? The billions of dollars gone down the drain, and the guys are still going around free. The problem of Nigeria, the problem of corruption. If we get it right, we get corruption right in this country, we are going to smile home, we are going to be happy, and our children will be the happiest children in the whole world.